Disability is just a medical condition, nothing more, nothing less. The real handicap comes from the social construct. When people see me, the only thing they see is the fact that I'm blind. But man, I am many other things besides blind. I'm stubborn, I'm stupid. That will come in your way more than my blindness.
Disability is both a cause and consequence of poverty.
20 million people are blind simply because they don't have 1,500 bucks.
Blind people can accomplish incredible things, but there's a tone of limitation to that, right? Hi, and welcome to the Changemakers Book Club. I'm Gunjali, and I'm so glad you're here. In each episode, we dive into a contemporary book with people who are driving change through their work. We chat about what they loved or didn't about the book, and how it connects to the way they see the world, the challenges we face, and the change we need to make. A little bit about me. I spent over a decade working in the development sector and a lifetime finding both escape and meaning in good books. Book clubs have been my anchor and helped keep me grounded through many seasons of change. This podcast brings together two things I care deeply about: powerful stories and the passionate people who are working to drive real change in the world. I hope it leaves you with fresh ideas, renewed hope, and a good book recommendation to dive into. Now let's get into the conversation. Joining us today is Sudhir Shenoy, a self-described adventure junkie, marathoner, and someone with a deep passion for giving back. With nearly 3 decades of experience in the chemical industry, Sudhir brings not just professional insight, but also a rich personal commitment to inclusion and impact. He's a passionate supporter of disability inclusion and has been actively involved with organizations such as Karman, a nonprofit that creates employment opportunities for people with disabilities in India. His journey in philanthropy has been deeply shaped by his time with social venture partners, which he credits for helping him shift from charity to meaningful, impactful giving. Our second guest today is Divyanshu Ganatra, psychologist, adventurer, and a fearless changemaker who has redefined what's possible. After losing his sight at 19, he refused to let that limit his vision. He went on to become India's first solo blind pilot, a mountaineer who summited Kilimanjaro, and the first blind tandem cyclist to conquer the world's highest motorable road. Divyanshu is the founder of Adventures Beyond Barriers Foundation, which brings people with and without disabilities together through inclusive outdoor sports to break stereotypes and build empathy. A passionate advocate for disability inclusion and mindset transformation, he inspires audiences around the world, from Fortune 500 companies to TEDx stages. We're honored to have him here today to reflect on the country of the blind and what it means to truly go beyond our limits. Thanks for joining, Sudhir and Divyanshu. Sudhir, I want to come to you first. Can you just share your personal reflections while reading the book and what really stood out to you in Andrew's narrative and why?
Thanks, Gunjali. This book also coincided with my own tryst with dealing with some kind of a disability where I was struggling to be able to read this book because of my eyesight starting to deteriorate. I needed to read with glasses. And it challenged me a lot to be able to manage through the initial resistance. I tried all kinds of stuff, including this audio transcript. I could not make any sense. 1x was too slow, and 1.5x even was just too fast for me to be able to grasp with it. But the beauty of that was also it introduced me to the concept of audiobooks, which I had never done till then. And that's grown on me so much that it's become my primary mode of consuming books from there on. But coming back to the book itself, I enjoyed the book. One is because I think I saw this as a real life narrative and not one more of those inspirational stories that I have come to associate with anything to do with disability literature. And I loved The Country of the Blind, the title that the author has picked for the book. To me, it felt like the book has brought it to a point where blindness or disability at a broader level is not something which is unfortunate. It's actually a culture in itself. It's a culture which has its own tradition, which almost has its own language. And it's just about being able to deal with it. As an example, one of the things I've always thought about is, what if you took someone from India who only spoke English and let's say one of the Indian languages and dropped them into a country in Africa or Latin America where no one speaks English or any of the Indian languages? Would you suddenly become disabled? Would you consider that you were then deserving of pity? Or would you just need to learn new skills? You need someone to provide some degree of accommodation and allyship to help you eventually come up that you still be able to perform at your potential. And that is what we have deprived a lot of persons with disabilities across, especially countries like India, where we treat them as the outliers, we treat them as deserving of our sympathy and pity, but we don't think of them as someone who just needs a little bit of help and accommodation to be able to realize their potential.
Yeah, no, and I think the examples that you talk about, a couple that come to mind right now for me are around how sighted people going to this conference and they're dressing up to go and they're wondering like why are they dressing up? I mean, they can't even see. And I think the chapter around the male gaze was a very interesting chapter as well, talking about how we tend to see folks that are disabled with this like asexual kind of lens. But Divyanshu, let me come to you. Let me specifically talk about the part where Andrew recounts a moment when he's with his doctor. He's having his checkups and the doctor says that without the ambulatory vision, he won't be able to use his sight to navigate the world he currently does. And she acknowledges that blind people can accomplish incredible things, but there's a tone of limitation to that, right? And I think you've just shattered those limitations yourself, right? Like flying solo, summiting Kilimanjaro. And just a few days ago, we heard the news of Chonzin Angmo making history as the first blind woman to summit Mount Everest. I think clearly the issue isn't capability, it's perception. Can you speak to the most common like misconceptions people have about the abilities of those with visual impairments?
Wow, there are lots of things there. But firstly, thank you, Gunjali, for having me here. This book really is incredible in the sense that it's the lived experiences of somebody going blind. And I could relate a lot with this book in many ways. And this initial interaction that he has with the doctor also reminded me of my early interactions with rehab specialists and doctors. In the book also, he points out about Eric Weinmeier and about him summiting Everest. But the tonality, the way she talks about is more on accepting your reality, low expectations. And there is this big disconnect between high achievements and low expectations from the blind community. We're proven beyond a doubt that it is not capacity which is a problem. It is the people's perceptions that is a problem, the stereotypes that people carry, which is the problem. There are major stereotypes around blindness, which also have been mentioned in the book and are some of the lived experiences of somebody who is blind. And the first stereotype is the fact that, people who are blind are helpless and will need some kind of care and help. Almost to the point of treating people who are blind as infants, including strange questions like, how do you eat? What do you mean, how do you eat? How does one eat? You don't look into the mirror when you eat, do you? I've had so many instances where I'm sitting there quietly eating in a restaurant and people have come up to me and said, oh, it's so inspiring. We've been watching you for a while and every spoonful of your food has gone into your mouth. I'm like, where else was it supposed to go? I've been asked this question that, you live by yourself. And, but then how do you dress yourself? Such questions of almost infantilizing me. My answers are dependent on my mood. Sometimes my mood is like, of course I've got good neighbors. They come and dress me. And then people freak out. They don't know. That's an everyday thing. The other major stereotype that people have is the fact that people think either you're blind or sighted. They're two binaries. And this again has come out so beautifully in the book where he's losing his sight. He's not yet blind, not yet sighted. And people don't realize that people who are blind come on a spectrum. There are people like me who are completely blind, no light perception at all. There are people who are blind and have light perception. There are people who have some usable sight. So we come on a spectrum, and understanding that different people have different needs and it's just not one or the other. The third major stereotype again are that we're incapable of independent living and we need institutional care or people to take care of us. That's a major stereotype. And if you even look at media, again, terrible portrayal of us as trolls or doing begging on the streets or poor or as people who need pity and sympathy. It has done a terrible job of perpetuating these stereotypes. And the last stereotype I'm going to talk about is that of this whole concept of job mapping and trade and skills that, if you're blind, then these are the jobs you can do and these are jobs you can't do. I can talk to from my own experience that when I went into rehab and institutions, for the blind, I was told what career options I had. And I had to largely choose between those career options, which is basically chalk making, candle making, making incense sticks, paper bags. And nothing wrong with those jobs, Gujali. Those are all honorable jobs. But when asked what more, what different, why not computers or technology, the answer was always, how can you do it? Even today, all these years later, we continue the practice of job mapping. And who decides who will do what job? That's majorly stereotypical. If that's true, then Anu would not summit Everest and I would not be a pilot and any of those things, or I wouldn't be doing tech or neuroscience, none of those things. The most important thing to change is that of mindset and people's beliefs. People need to get more familiar with people who are blind or people with disability, because it is only through lived experiences people's perceptions and mindsets can change. It is not through PVD, it is not through simulation. Even when reading a book, you might think, oh, that's inspiring or that's interesting, but doesn't change your perception towards the larger community. But when you have friends, when you spend time, that's when your perception change. The other thing towards changing this narrative in the world for people with disability and especially blind is to raise the bar. The bar is so low for us that, for example, it's a stereotype that, oh, blind people means you must be playing good music. And trust me, if I start singing, people would just appreciate it and say, oh, wow, nobody's telling me that, dude, I don't think you should sing or go practice some more. But everybody just appreciates it so much that end up thinking, oh, I'm awesome. But guess why I'm not getting, I don't know why I'm not getting any work. Why nobody is hiring me as a musician. The bar is terribly low.
I think you brought the point about access intimacy. I think this is a concept that Andrew talks about in the book. It's a concept from the disability justice educator Mia Mingus about folks interacting with the sighted and the non-sighted folks interacting with each other. And that kind of goes to the work that Adventure Beyond Barriers Foundation does. I want to bring you into that experience a little bit. One of my personal moments that I wanted to share is in the practice run for the 10K disability run that we did with the Adventure Beyond Barriers Foundation on Marine Drive. Divyanshu took the time to orient all of us, the sighted runners, before we paired with our visually impaired partners. He reminded us that this experience wasn't just about running, but about the connection. He encouraged us to really get into our partners with what they were comfortable with, how they wanted to run, whether it meant holding hands and running, or the band, or shoulder to shoulder running, etc. Those experiences are necessary. You've run many marathons and you've also taken part in the inclusion runs as well. Can you talk a little bit about how the experience is like?
There's two important days in a person's life: the day you were born and the day you know why. I ran 2019 Tata Mumbai Marathon, I think, as an ally with a blind partner for the half marathon. And the practice runs leading up to those, and then the event itself gave me access, intimacy. That was the first time I was truly a partner with someone over an extended period of time, doing all the practice runs together. I actually even tripped my partner once and hurt his ankle. And there was this fear at that point in time, because it used to be dark early morning when we used to practice. You couldn't see the potholes. Even I couldn't see the potholes. So how would I navigate him through the practice runs? But then I realized that my partner had absolutely no qualms. I'm sure he had fallen innumerable number of times, that this was one more added to the list, that it didn't really matter at all. But for me, it was a completely different experience of having gone through it. And that was really the seed through which we started to think about the model of these inclusion runs, which has a life of its own and has really grown well beyond any of us would have imagined. But just being a part of that, being able to see from close quarters what it meant to be an ally, understanding the lived experiences and challenges, the persons with disabilities, seeing the joy, which was both a little bit sad as well as reaffirming in some ways, when you realize that most of those persons with disabilities that participated had never ever been recognized or given a medal for anything in their life. This is the first time that they felt that it meant something, that they were someone, right? They mattered, that we actually chased them for coming and participating. We got upset when they didn't show up or they came late for the practice runs. And for them was this unusual feeling is that nobody seems to care usually whether I show up or not. And that was, I think, was a very revealing experience that we went through. I used to get very upset and saying, I am coming all the way from far away and I'm waiting for you. And then I would realize that they had to battle all kinds of challenges to get there to Nariman Point at 5:36 in the morning, taking local trains and everything else. And I think a lot of humbling experiences that I personally went through as I went through that journey. And I think it's just helped me become a better ally on that journey.
And Divyanshu, can I have you also then talk about the work of Adventures Beyond Barriers Foundation? What you see as the change that the work that you're doing there is bringing?
So the work of our foundation, Adventures Beyond Barriers, largely stems around disability inclusion and mainstreaming people with disability, changing the ecosystem and bringing about systemic change. It's not about immediate, tangible, measurable, what you can see and feel and take pictures of. It's about long-term systemic change. We believe we can bring about systemic change when we get these two communities of people with and without disability together through the medium of sport and play, because play offers a great space for people to unite, to make friendships. It also is a language everybody understands. It also is a great way to end discrimination, build friendships and empathy. And there are benefits to both communities. People with disability, this is a great way to make them visible. It's a great way to mainstream them, great way to bring them out of their homes. Because with 200 million of us in India alone, 1.4 billion around the world. So this is a great way to get them out, pair them shoulder to shoulder alongside non-disabled folk. And then to me, each one of us wants to do good. We just don't know how. We just are ignorant about this large community of people with disability. And we don't realize how much influence each one of us has to make a positive impact on this world. You could be CEO, you could be a software developer, you could be HR, you could be a teacher, you could be an architect, you could be anybody, but there is incredible amount of change you can bring in this world by doing what you're doing. Because to us, disability is just a medical condition, nothing more, nothing less. But the real handicap comes from the social construct, comes from the way all of us create this world. And that is what needs to change. Because once we realize how we can change that, the handicaps go away. So, for example, if you're in a wheelchair and I ask you, can you go up this flight of steps? The answer is no. But if I say, can you go up this ramp? The answer is yes. So it is not so much as a factor that I'm in a wheelchair or I'm blind. It is also a factor of the built environment. And that's what ABBF strives to do. When we started about 11 years ago, there was no marathon allowing people with disability. And then there were marathons that only allowed people with disability to run the 1.5 kilometer category. And then when we started doing this 11 years ago, we started this slowly. Now we partner with some of the biggest platforms and we're doing everything, the 10K, the 21K, the 42K. So many other running organizations have started replicating this, have started inviting runners with disability because they're seeing it's amazing, they can do this. The
Goes to your point of low expectations, right?
Yeah, we have allies. We pair people, our runners with disability with allies. And the typical call goes like this. Oh, so I'm going to pair with a runner with disability. How slow will we need to run? Or should we just walk? I'm like, no, you need to run. They're like, okay, how slow? And we ask them, okay, so how much time do you take to complete a 10K, roughly? What's your personal best? And they're like, oh, I can do it in about 70 minutes. We're like, you don't even qualify. Our guys are doing it in 50 minutes, 45 minutes. And they're like, no way. You're kidding. And I'm like, no, that's true. Our guys and girls are doing 21K in 1 hour 40 minutes. 42K in 2 hour 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Those are unheard of timings even in the ordinary realm. The purpose is that here's an opportunity for others to help you finish.
Yes.
You never
yes.
think of people with disability as helping you, right? You always come with the mindset that I'm going to help others across the finish line.
I think I had my personal best because of him.
There you go. It is
Experiences.
these narratives that need to be challenged. It's these perceptions, stereotypes that need to be challenged. It's our notions of volunteering and these hierarchies we create that needs to be challenged. Because you never look at a person with disability and think of them as equals. You always think of them as somebody needing help.
No,
If there are two
that's
people, if I and another able-bodied person is sitting next to me, who would you ask help to?
Yeah, certainly a powerful reminder to check the stereotypes that we commonly hold within ourselves as well. But I think I want to ask this question to both of you, and maybe Sudhir, you can start first. I think the author writes about how the most important factor that shapes the quality of life for a blind person is not the time or the culture that they live in, but perhaps the economic and the familial situation they're born into. From the work that you do now in the disability space with other organizations as well, what are your reflections on this?
Disability is both a cause and consequence of poverty, especially in a developing country like India. When I have family, for example, in the US and other Western countries who have disabilities versus when I look at people in India, and there's a huge difference between, right? So it's not just about your disability. The same disability in two different contexts can have very different meanings in terms of what you are able to achieve and pursue. It's as much about, of course, your familial situation, your economic, financial situation that allows you, whether it's access to something as simple as roads, which are access friendly for persons with disabilities, having ramps, having public transport that allows you to be able to move around. But at the same time, it's also about attitudes and mindsets. I think that is another big barrier that I've seen in developed countries where it's much more common to see someone with a disability who's independently navigating and moving around at your workplace, restaurants, at airports, at train stations, or wherever else. In India, that's a very rare sight that you would see something like that. And again, this probably goes back to the earlier point about access intimacy. It's also because most of us in India grow up not having had any exposure to someone with a lived experience of disability. Not because they don't exist, to Divyanshu's earlier point, there are hundreds of millions of those in the country. In theory, you should be running into them every 10th person or less. And yet, the fact that we don't is not because they don't exist, because we have segregated them from society at a very early stage and sent them to special schools, if at all, and kept them away from the mainstream. And that's the narrative that we are trying to change. I think it makes a huge difference. The same disability can manifest itself in dramatically different forms and give or remove access to a life of dignity and independence, depending on where you come from. The beauty of it is that it doesn't need a lot. You can change the world for millions and millions of people with relatively small changes, whether it is in your infrastructure, but most importantly, in your mindsets. And if we can continue to have those conversations, if we can build the ability for inclusive communities, I think that will go a long way to change the world for persons with disabilities.
I relate quite strongly to this because when I look at myself in context of my community, I'm extremely privileged. I'm not representative of my community in a large way because of the lottery that I won, of privilege, of education, of having family support, of getting medical help, of getting good health and nutrition. All of these things are a lottery that I just won. But more than 80% of people with disability in India come from extremely disadvantaged backgrounds. So it's a double whammy. On one hand, you have economically disadvantaged, which is in itself a huge challenge. And then you have a disability, it's a double whammy. And if you're a woman with disability and economically disadvantaged, it's a triple whammy. And most of them come from those backgrounds. And hence, they don't even have a voice. The facilities that are provided to them are all based on charity models and pity and let them survive in institutional care. Institutions don't do a great job of really empowering them. So I somewhere feel it's a huge factor, and it's extremely sad that out of the 40 million blind in India alone, which is where the blind capital of the world, by the way, half of them struggle with what is known as reversible blindness, which means that perhaps a 1200 rupee medical intervention can reverse their sight. But either they don't have any medical help or they don't have the money. When you think that 20 million people are blind simply because they don't have the means, and really limited means of 1500 bucks, it really makes you think. Like many other developed countries where my friends are, and I hear from them, they just need to make a requisition to the government saying, I need a white cane, or I need a printer, or I need a laptop with screen reader, a social worker, rehab facilities, inclusive education. These are all givens in many developed countries, which in India are far from reality. So we have a long way to go.
And I think for me, one of the amazing parts about the book is how sort of Andrew's reflecting on his situation. He ends it with just this gratitude about where he's at and how he's able to cope with the situation that he's in, but also really thrive given the circumstances he finds himself. That was interesting as well. Yes. Because this is a book club podcast, I do want both of you to weigh in on the book, whether you recommend it, what it will do for a reader, and whether folks should read it or not.
For me, of course, given the background that I was coming from, it resonated with me deeply. It's a very humbling commentary on the lived experiences of someone who's going through this transition and knowing their condition and recognizing the biases, both conscious and unconscious biases, even in a country like the US. Also interesting to see some of the aspects such as the politics that still happens and the different philosophies altogether, right? Between whether what kind of accommodation should be provided. One organization has a feeling that there should not be these accommodations provided, while the other believes there is something. And it's a philosophical debate, but also it's a very real life commentary on the kind of challenges that someone who's going through disability. And then I think some of the anecdotes from the book for me very deeply resonated with my own personal experiences, like this inspiration porn or pity masquerading as empathy. We see that so often in our societies and communities. And if someone sits to really go through it and try and imbibe the kind of ethos of that book and where Andrew is coming from, I think it's phenomenal reading for someone to get through. I'd absolutely strongly recommend it as a book to read, but not a quick read. I'd say that take the time to go through it and soak it in.
Divyanshu?
100% I would resonate with what Sudhir said. It's not a book you just read for just a quick read. It is a book you really read, slowly digest every bit of it, go research. Highly recommend, because it really speaks to the lived experiences of somebody who's making a transition from a quote unquote a non-disabled life to a life of somebody with a disability. Also contextualizing it that if this is the struggles in US, which is a highly developed country, imagine the struggles for people in less developed countries, in low income groups, how marginalized and how difficult it must be. And one of the things that really I resonated with the book is that blindness is just a characteristic. And often I struggle with this, like, for example, if I was to make a Tinder profile, do I put the fact that I'm blind or do I not put the fact that I'm blind? Now, many will say, of course you should put the fact that I'm blind. But I'm like, but I'm not putting all my characteristics. That's just one of my characteristics. I'm not putting the fact that I have this skin tone or that I have a mole here or anything else. It is just as basic as that to me. And I subscribe to the fact that it's just a characteristic, nothing more, nothing less. So to me, it never even occurs to me that this can be such an important thing. So I quite resonated with that. And I think it would be interesting if we start living life and start looking at people. I think that's the big thing. That when people see me, the only thing they see me is the fact that I'm blind. But man, and many other things besides blind, which may come in a way. I'm stubborn, I'm stupid, I'm... Trust me, that will come in your way more than my blindness. Yeah, I would highly recommend this book, and it can completely change somebody's life.
What was that statement in the book, which was about at the end? I think is about what do we lose when we fixate on what others have lost. I think to me, it was very poignant moment, brought back that reality. Truly, Divyanshu's point, we just fixate on that one thing when we see someone with a disability. That's all.
What a powerful reminder to check ourselves when the first thing is that comes to mind is the one that we latch on to. But no, thank you both. It's been such an amazing conversation, and I loved unpacking the book with both of you. I am very grateful, and I'm sure so are the folks who are listening to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gunjali. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Changemakers Book Club, where we talked about The Country of the Blind by Andrew Leland. A special thank you to my guests for sharing their insights. If you found this book fascinating, I've got a couple of recommendations for you. First, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb, a memoir that blends humor, vulnerability, offering a deep look at therapy, self-discovery, and healing. Like The Country of the Blind, it touches on themes of acceptance, vulnerability, and how we come to terms with our own lives and experiences, especially when confronting disabilities or personal challenges. And even though it's a children's book, Wonder by R.J. Palacio is a powerful story about empathy and acceptance. It's a beautiful reminder of the importance of seeing people for who they truly are, no matter their differences, a theme that is very much alive in Leland's book as well. If you have any thoughts on today's episode or a book you'd like us to feature, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. This is Gunjali, and thank you for listening.